I never planned to keep my success a secret, but when you grow up with parents like mine, you learn that sometimes silence is your greatest weapon. My name is Sarah Chin, and this is the story of how I built a $900 million company while my family thought I was failing. The garden table at my parents' weekly family dinner felt smaller than usual that Friday evening. Maybe it was the weight of the news I knew was about to break, or maybe it was just the suffocating disappointment that seemed to radiate from my mother's perfectly pressed silk blouse. "Sarah, darling," Mom began, delicately cutting into her salmon. "I ran into Janet Wong at the club yesterday. Her daughter Jessica just made junior partner at Goldman Sachs." She paused, letting the achievement hang in the air like a guillotine blade. "Wasn't she in your class at Harvard?" I took a slow sip of water, already knowing where this was heading. "Yes, Mom, we had several classes together." "Such a smart girl," Dad chimed in, not looking up from his phone. "Following the proper path. Unlike some people who throw away perfectly good careers to play entrepreneur in their garage." 3 years ago, their words would have cut deep, but tonight, they barely touched me. I checked my watch, 7:45 p.m. 15 minutes until the Wall Street Journal article went live. "Speaking of my garage startup," I said, pulling out one of my business cards and sliding it across the table. "I brought you a new card. We rebranded last month." Dad picked it up between his thumb and forefinger like it might be contaminated. "Chin Innovations," he read with a smirk. "Very original, Sarah. What happened to that cute little name you had before? Something about butterflies?" "Chrysalis Tech," I corrected him. "We outgrew it." Mom put down her fork, concern etched across her perfectly maintained features. "Sweetheart, I think it's time we had a serious discussion about your future. You're 32 now. All your cousins are established in their careers, starting families. I have a career, Mom. Playing with computers in your garage is not a career." Dad's voice rose as he slapped my business card down. "We didn't spend a fortune on your education so you could waste your life on this hobby." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same one I felt 3 years ago when I quit my prestigious consulting job to start my company. Back then, their disapproval had nearly crushed me. Now it just served as fuel. "Do you even make any money?" Mom pressed. "When was the last time you took a real vacation or bought new clothes? That blouse you're wearing, I swear I saw it at last year's Christmas dinner." I touched the simple blue silk blouse, one of my favorites, actually, and smiled. "I do all right, Mom." "All right," Dad scoffed. "Your brother James just closed a $50 million deal at his firm. That's doing all right. You're playing pretend CEO with a bunch of computer nerds." 7:55 p.m. 5 minutes to go. The thing about my parents is that they've always measured success in very specific ways. Prestigious job titles, designer labels, luxury cars, and country club memberships. When I graduated from Harvard Business School, they had my life planned out perfectly. Join a top consulting firm, check. Climb the corporate ladder, started. Marry a suitable man from our social circle, pending, and live the life they'd worked so hard to provide. Instead, I discovered something they couldn't understand, a vision. It happened during a routine consulting project. I was helping a major bank upgrade their cybersecurity systems when I noticed a fundamental flaw in how financial institutions handled digital transactions. There was a gap, small but significant, that no one else seemed to see, a way to make digital banking not just secure, but virtually unhackable. The idea consumed me. I spent months researching, developing, testing. When I finally understood what I had, I tried to explain it to my firm's partners. They patted me on the head, metaphorically, and told me to focus on my assigned projects. So I quit. The day I told my parents I was leaving my six-figure consulting job to start a cybersecurity company, you'd have thought I'd announced I was joining a cult. Mom cried. Dad yelled. My brother James, the golden child, tried to have me committed for a mental health evaluation. "At least tell me you're still meeting with that nice Richard Wong," Mom said now, bringing me back to the present. "His investment firm is doing very well, and he comes from such a good family." I checked my phone. 7:59 p.m. Actually, Mom, Richard's firm tried to invest in my company last year. Really? Dad's head snapped up. What happened? I turned them down. Their valuation was too low. Mom threw up her hands. Of course you did. Heaven forbid you take advice from successful people who know what they're doing. 8 o'clock p.m. Right on cue, 3 phones chimed simultaneously, mine, Dad's, and James's, who had been uncharacteristically quiet all evening. Breaking news alerts from the Wall Street Journal. What the Dad's voice trailed off as he read the headline. His face, normally tanned from weekend golf sessions, went pale. Mom looked between us. Robert, what is it? James let out a low whistle as he read his phone. Holy shit, Sarah. With trembling fingers, Dad read the headline aloud. Tech startup Chen Innovations reveals revolutionary banking security protocol. Major banks bid war drives valuation to $900 million. The silence that followed was the sweetest sound I'd ever heard. You see, while my parents thought I was failing, playing entrepreneur in my garage, I've been building something revolutionary. Those computer nerds they dismissed, world-class engineers and cryptographers who believed in my vision. That garage, a secure development facility with more computing power than most universities. And today, after 3 years of work, dozens of patents, and successful pilot programs with 3 major banks, we were finally going public with what we built. 900 million? Mom stammered, reaching for Dad's phone. There must be some mistake. No mistake, I said quietly, taking another sip of water. The valuation is actually low. We turned down a $1 billion offer from Goldman last week. They wanted too much control. Dad's hand shook as he poured himself more wine, spilling some on the pristine tablecloth. Mom didn't even notice, too busy scrolling through the article, her eyes growing wider with each paragraph. The article doesn't even tell the whole story. I continued, warming to my subject. Would you like to know how many banks are currently bidding for our technology? Or how many government agencies have requested meetings? Or maybe you'd be interested in knowing that Richard Wong's firm is now offering 20 times what they offered last year. James let out another whistle. Sis, why didn't you tell me? I could have helped with the legal side. The same way you helped by suggesting I needed psychiatric help when I started the company? He had the grace to look ashamed. Mom finally found her voice. But your clothes, your car, you live in that tiny apartment. I smiled, thinking about the real estate agent who was quietly finding me a new home. Did it ever occur to you that I might have different priorities than designer labels and luxury cars? That success isn't always visible on the surface. All this time, Dad muttered, still staring at his phone. All those dinners where you mocked my choices, belittled my dreams, treated me like a failure. I kept my voice calm, but I could feel years of frustration bubbling up. Yes, Dad, all this time. The garden fell silent again, broken only by the gentle splash of the fountain Mom had imported from Italy. In that moment, I saw my parents clearly, perhaps for the first time. They weren't the all-knowing arbiters of success I'd once thought them to be. They were just people trapped in their own narrow view of what achievement should look like. My phone buzzed again. Another news alert, another article about Chen Innovations. Soon the calls would start. Investors, journalists, potential clients. Our quiet phase was over, and everything was about to change. I stood up, smoothing down my old silk blouse. I should go. It's going to be a busy few days. Sarah, wait, Mom called out as I reached for my bag. We should celebrate. I'll call the club, arrange a party. Actually, I'm hosting a company celebration next week. Nothing fancy, just a dinner for my team. The brilliant computer nerds who helped build this company. You're welcome to come if you'd like to meet them. I walked to my car, my practical 3-year-old Toyota, leaving them at the table, still shell-shocked. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of them in my rearview mirror. Dad still staring at his phone, Mom dabbing at her eyes with her napkin, James shaking his head in disbelief. Part 2. The Truth Behind Success. The next morning, my office was barely recognizable. Gone was the peaceful space where I built my company. In its place, a whirlwind of activity filled every corner. PR teams huddled around conference tables, investors waited in the lobby, and my phone hadn't stopped ringing since dawn. Sarah, Goldman's on line 3, my assistant Rachel called out as I navigated through the chaos. And your mother's called 6 times. I paused. Of course she had. Take messages for both. My garage startup occupied the top 3 floors of a renovated warehouse in the city's tech district. Not that my parents had ever visited to know this. The garage they imagined was actually 30,000 square feet of state-of-the-art research and development space. The computer nerds were a team of over 100 brilliant engineers, cryptographers, and security experts from around the world. Team meeting in 5, I announced, heading to our main conference room. As I walked, I caught my reflection in a window, still wearing yesterday's old silk blouse. Mom would be horrified. The thought made me smile. The conference room filled quickly. These faces, some tired from working through the night, others excited by our public revelation, were the real story behind Chen Innovation's success. People who believed in the vision when it was just sketches on a whiteboard. First, I began, looking around the room. Thank you all for your extraordinary work. The security protocols we've developed together will change how the world handles digital transactions. You should be proud. Dr. Patel, our lead cryptographer, raised his hand. What about the acquisition offers? Ah, the billion-dollar question. Literally. As of this morning, we've received offers from 6 major banks and 3 tech giants. I paused, letting that sink in. But we're not selling. The room erupted in cheers. They understood what I'd known from the beginning. Our technology was too important to be controlled by any single institution. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mom. Darling, the club is free next Saturday for your celebration. I've already spoken to the event planner. I put the phone away. She still didn't get it. Later that afternoon, as I finally caught a moment alone in my office, my mind wandered back to how this all started. Not the moment I discovered the security flaw. That was just the spark. The real beginning was a conversation I had with my grandmother before she passed away. I was still at my consulting job, miserable but too afraid to leave. Grandma Chen, unlike her son, my father, had built something from nothing. She'd arrived in America with $10 and a dream, eventually building a successful import-export business. Sarah, she'd said, holding my hand in her hospital room. There are 2 kinds of people in this world. Those who build their dreams and those who live in the dreams others built for them. Your father, he chose the second path. But you, my girl, you have the builder's spark in your eyes. She passed away 2 weeks later. I quit my job the next day. The early days were brutal. I emptied my savings, sold my designer wardrobe, much to Mom's horror, and moved into a tiny apartment to fund initial development. My first team members worked for equity because I couldn't afford salaries. We really did start in a garage, my landlord's, actually, which we rented for extra workspace. Dad's words from those days still echoed. You're throwing your life away on a fantasy. But we weren't. Every sleepless night, every failed test, every ramen dinner brought us closer to something revolutionary. Our security protocol didn't just patch the vulnerability I'd discovered, it completely reimagined how digital systems could protect themselves. A knock at my office door broke through my memories. James stood there, looking uncomfortable in his $1,000 suit. The receptionist almost didn't let me up, he said, attempting a joke. Quite a change from your garage. I gestured for him to sit. What brings you here, James? Mom's crying, Dad's drinking, and I? He trailed off, looking around my office. I owe you an apology. That mental health evaluation thing. I was wrong. Yes, you were. He fidgeted with his tie. Look, my firm would love to handle your legal work. With all these offers coming in. Stop. I held up my hand. That's not an apology. That's an attempt to profit from my success. His face reddened. Sarah, be reasonable. We're family. Funny, that didn't matter when you all thought I was failing. Another knock saved him from responding. Rachel poked her head in. Sorry to interrupt, but the team needs you. We're seeing some unusual patterns in the test deployment. I stood up. I have to go. Real work to do. Sarah, James called as I reached the door. How did you know? How did you know it would work when everyone said you were crazy? I thought about Grandma Chen, about those early days in the actual garage, about the moment our first prototype succeeded. I didn't know, I answered honestly. I just knew I had to try. That's the difference between builders and dreamers, to James. Builders don't need certainty. They just need courage. Leaving him in my office, I headed to the R&D floor where my team was gathered around a bank of monitors. This was my real family, the ones who believed, who built, who sacrificed. Dr. Patel waved me over. Look at this pattern in the neural network. It's evolving faster than our projections. As I lost myself in the technical discussion, my phone buzzed one last time. A text from Mom. "Darling, please. Let us make this right. We're having a small dinner party tomorrow. Just a few close friends who'd love to hear about your success." I turned off the phone. They still didn't understand. This wasn't about them anymore. It never really was. That evening, as the office finally quieted, I stood at the window looking out over the city. 3 years ago, I'd walked away from everything my parents valued: prestige, security, status. In their eyes, I'd chosen certain failure. But standing there, watching the sunset reflect off neighboring buildings, I realized something important. Success isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. My practical Toyota still sat in the parking lot, now surrounded by news vans. The old silk blouse hung comfortably on my shoulders. Tomorrow, I face more investors, more journalists, more family drama. But tonight, in this moment, I was exactly where I needed to be. My phone lay silent on my desk, but I knew what was happening across town. Mom would be calling her friends, trying to spin this revelation into something that fit her worldview. Dad would be researching my company, finally reading the patents he dismissed as fantasy. James would be calculating how to benefit from his connection to me. Let them. Their actions said more about them than they ever did about me. Dr. Patel appeared at my door. "Sarah, the team's ordering dinner. That little Vietnamese place you love. Want to join?" I smiled, thinking about the celebration Mom was probably still planning at the country club. Absolutely. As we walked to the elevator surrounded by empty energy drink cans and whiteboards covered in complex algorithms, I felt a deep sense of peace. This was success, not the valuation, not the headlines, but this. Building something meaningful. Leading a team that shared my vision. Staying true to myself even when everyone I loved said I was wrong. The next morning, a package arrived at my office. Inside was an old, worn business card for Chen Imports and Exports, and a handwritten note. "Found this in your grandmother's things. Thought you should have it. Dad." I pinned the card to my wall, right next to my joke of a business card that he'd mocked just days ago. Grandma Chen would have understood. She would have been proud not of the $900 million valuation, but of the courage it took to get here. My phone buzzed. Rachel this time. The Pentagon's on line 1. They want to discuss potential applications. I smiled, picking up the phone. Time to build something even bigger. Because that's what builders do. We don't wait for permission. We don't need validation. We see possibilities where others see problems, and we have the courage to chase them. As for my parents, maybe someday they'll understand that success isn't always measured in designer labels and country club memberships. Maybe they'll learn that true achievement often comes quietly, wrapped in determination and late-night coffee runs rather than silk and status. But even if they don't, I know who I am. I'm Sarah Chin, and I build things that matter.